Hi, I'm Nick Hughes. I'm co-founder of Inspire Tribe and co-developer of the EQ Code. And in this video, I'm seriously excited to be introducing you to what I consider to be the start of an EQ revolution. Sounds like a big claim, but I'm willing to back my reputation on it. It's March 2020, and I'm relatively confident because I've got the EQ Code at my back. Now, the EQ Code is, as I say, the framework that we've developed, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but let me talk about the inception of where the code came from and why it came about. After a very successful finance career, I got to a position in my life where I was independently wealthy, but not feeling so good inside. It was then that I sought out a coach, and Yolande, or sort of a number of coaches, and eventually started to train as a coach myself. And I met Yolande when I went to train as a coach. And when I watched Yolande and her training techniques and also how she coached her clients, I realized that there's there's one type of coaching and then there's another type of coaching, and that they can be very different. Yolande was just a brilliant coach, intuitively gifted, seemed to follow the rules until she didn't follow the rules, and she knew exactly when not to follow the rules. So when it came to me learning how to coach, I decided to ditch the standard methods and simply unpack Yolande's intuition and her gifts. Now, I thought that wouldn't take too long. It actually took about 7 years, but it's been worth it. So I am a mechanical engineer by background, have no psychology degree or anything like that. However, I have a laser sense of logic. I'm a hyperlogical individual on the spectrum, unofficially. That would be the autism spectrum, but it just gives you an idea of how logical I am. And I'm also systems obsessed. So when you take a systems obsessed individual, such as myself, and you combine me with, or put me together in the same space as someone who is as intuitively gifted as Yolande, we create this amazing synergy together. And that's seen us develop the EQ Code. Now, what the EQ Code does is it basically takes individuals who have lower levels of emotional intelligence or gaps in their emotional intelligence, and it helps them to jump across to a higher degree of emotional intelligence very rapidly. We can go into the importance of emotional intelligence. That's in other videos. I'm not going to do that today. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you understand just how critically important emotional intelligence is in our own personal life, our family life, our social life, and also very much in our business life. When I met Yolande, what I saw was her ability to take people one by one across the chasm from low emotional intelligence to high emotional intelligence. And I was very keen to use her insights to allow us to take many people at once across, so we could do it in a systemized way and rapidly improve people's emotional intelligence levels. Now, that's a good aim. Sounds good. Psychologists and philosophers and personal development individuals have been aiming for this for decades. And despite that, well, on top of that, I could say, actually, to date, all that work from all those individuals has seen our overall humanity, our emotional intelligence of our humanity, evolve at a relatively standard human rate, which means not very quickly at all. So if we look at emotional intelligence about 400 years before BC, then we had wars, rapes, murders, and violence in family homes on a regular basis. And if we come forward about 2,500 years to the year 2020, we still have wars, rapes, murders, and we have violence. 1 in 6 women in Australia experience violence. So although we may have improved in our emotional intelligence overall, it's not that big an increase. So when I got into the space of working with people's mindsets and helping them to improve their emotional intelligence, I was looking for what's the edge? Where can we get scale, and where can we improve the emotional intelligence very rapidly, like Yolande was doing? So watching someone who's intuitively gifted is interesting, but when we combine that information with information such as what happened in the IT industry and what caused the IT revolution, we can come up with insights that can see us create massive leaps in our understanding. So I personally have a very logical background. I mentioned that before. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've also done my own, I was a hobbyist coder and a computer programmer. And because of that background, I was aware of a statistic that I read in the computing industry that said that computing processing power had improved 1 trillion-fold over the last 60 years. So from 1960 to 2020, or it was actually just before 2020, but in that vicinity, there'd been a 1 trillion improvement in basically the heart and the mind and the soul of computers. So the processing chip is the thing that drives the computer and makes the computer go quickly. So the more quickly a computer can go and the faster that it can process, the more we can do with computers. So 1 trillion-fold increase is just phenomenally impressive. If you know anything about numbers and how long it takes to make a 1 trillion-fold improvement, it's a lot. It's bloody hard work. But it happened in just 60 years. So I looked at that and I went, logically, if we can work out what the difference is between the emotional intelligence evolution and the IT revolution, then potentially we can create an emotional intelligence revolution. Sounds simple. The idea was very exciting. It took a number of years to drill down into the core of that idea. But after many, many hours of thinking and many hours of discussion, etc., what we came up with was the difference between emotional intelligence evolution and the IT revolution is the fact that one has hyperlogical rules that people all over the world apply on a consistent basis, and therefore they're able to effortlessly and easily collaborate. They can take person's work from India and use it in Australia, that can be used in China, and that work can be used anywhere else in the world. So IT professionals have been collaborating with an amazing degree of well, frictionless. So it's not to say it's no friction, but they've collaborated just beautifully and synergistically for the last 60 years to create such immense power so quickly. So if you look at your desk and everything you're looking at, in the last 60 years, that's all been developed because of IT professionals and their ability to improve the processing power of computers. If we look at the emotional intelligence evolution though, what we find is cultural, social, and diversity differences. So every time we pick up a book and read about anger, or we read about some emotion that we need to understand more deeply, we've got lots of different people coming from lots of different angles, and they're all saying similar things, but finding the exact overlap is very challenging and very difficult. So therefore it's very difficult to scale on top of each other's work with no friction, no loss of energy and expenditure. I particularly worked this out because I was someone who had high IQ but very low emotional intelligence. So when I realized that and I went to try and improve my emotional intelligence, it was like, jeepers, I've got to read 100 books. They're all saying things in slightly different ways. How do I actually combine them and understand them? So when I stopped doing that and just focused on what is it that helps to shift our clients, we came up with some very key insights, particularly when we looked at the difference with coding. So let's go and have a quick look at computer coding. You might think, I don't care about computer coding, I care about emotional intelligence, but trust me, it's going to be worthwhile. When it comes to computer coding, what happened in the computer world was that computers were based on switches, ones and zeros, going on and off. Now, that in itself is useful, but what happened was someone decided that a certain combination of 8 switches on and off, ones and zeros, would equal the letter A. So we went from being hyperlogical to a little bit less logical. Next combination made a different letter, another combination made the letter C, on and on and on it goes. So we've got all the letters of the alphabet covered and a couple of important characters as well. Now, when the computer coders did this, whoever decided on this combination was, I don't know who, but it doesn't matter. Everyone agreed that that simple combination of logical switches would mean that that is the case. Now, when that happened and everyone agreed, basically computer programmers could take those simple letters and they could use those letters to make simple words. Then the programs could use the simple words to create simple codes or simple rules that the computers could run off. And then they could share the rules that they'd created with each other to allow computers to do complex stuff. So from ones and zeros, back 60 years ago, where coders were using ones and zeros to start to program computers, we now have computers that have fundamentally changed the face of the world. They're in cars, they're in planes, they're on every home. There's computers absolutely everywhere, and they've fundamentally changed the face of the earth. So, amazing power. What if we could do that for emotional intelligence? What if we could code emotional intelligence such that people could start to work together with a high degree of accuracy so that they could leverage on each other's work with pretty much no friction? Big aim. And it sounds difficult, especially given we're not computers, so we can't work with on and off switches. But if we take that concept and we create what we call the EQ code, and we consider 14 logical elements. Now, they're not actually switches that go on and off, but they're like switches that go on and off. So they're 14 concepts that we can consider or not consider. And if we take those concepts and we can develop basically the logic that underpins deeply emotionally intelligent individuals. At the end of the day, humanity is complex, but we're all fundamentally the same. And when we really simplify it down to very simple concepts and get the black and the white of those concepts, so the extreme logic of either end, then we can start to understand very diverse opinions, and we can come together very easily and find a feeling-based space that feels good to everyone. And this is the fundamental concept of the EQ code. Very simple black and white logic that allows us to gradually start to feel into when black logic should apply and when white logic should apply. This is particularly important in a global society. And I'm going to give you quite an extreme example, so brace yourself for a bit of an extreme example. But when it comes to adultery, if someone commits adultery, should we stone them to death, or should we give them a cuddle and empathize with them, saying that their partner must have been a very harsh individual, a very unempathetic individual, in order to see them feel the need to go outside of the matrimonial home in order to get that physical connection and love? Pretty intense question, I understand, politically charged question, and deliberately so. The answer is, which is more right nor wrong, is there is no right or wrong, because it depends on where you were born. So if you were born in a particular culture, in a particular family, at a particular point in time, then stoning the person to death would be the appropriate and right thing to do. And everyone in that culture and who had those same right and wrong beliefs would believe that to be true. If, however, you're brought up in another culture and another community with another family, then you may believe that giving the person a cuddle is the right thing to do, and empathizing with the heartache that must have seen them go outside the matrimonial home. So in a world where we've got lots of, not obviously as intense, some even more intense, some less intense, but in the world where we've got lots of right, wrong that clash, we need to understand that it's no longer about right and wrong, it's about black and white logic. And if we can understand the core logic and the fundamental logic, then we can quickly start to find, as I say, that feeling-based space that suits ourselves in our culture and another culture as well, or our team, myself in my team and another team member as well. Sounds complex? It's actually not that complex. When we look at the EQ code, it's got actually 14 elements. They're represented by single words, and I'm going to take you through 4 of those in a minute just to give you a feel for how the elements work. But it's also with symbols. There's a particular reason why we've got elements that are logical elements supported by language, which is a logical process, and symbols that are a more intuitive-based thing. And that's because when it comes to our brain and improving our emotional intelligence, we need to work on 2 levels. We need to work on the front logical aspect of the brain, which understands the importance of emotional intelligence and understands the importance of being a nice human being. But we also need to work on the back part of the brain, the 97% of our unconscious intelligence that has been sculpted and molded from our upbringing. So we've all had different upbringings. Some of us have had wonderfully kind and loving upbringings. Others of us have had deeply traumatic upbringings. So the back part of our brain and each of us is very differently constructed based on our individualistic upbringing. So not only do we need to be able to teach the logical part of our brain, but we also need to be able to support the back part of the brain of understanding the importance of shifting. And this is where the EQ code power comes in. We have the logical aspect that supports our thinking, and then the feeling-based aspect, which is the back part of the brain, is supported with symbols. The other important thing about this concept is when it comes to highly intelligent individuals, I'd consider myself to be pretty intelligent, quite intelligent actually, so a bit egotistical, I know, but it's useful to understand that in highly intelligent individuals such as myself, if we are only taught things via words and via logic, then we're very good at manipulating the logic to suit our own ego and to keep us right. And so the smarter we are, the better we are at doing that, and the better we are at doing that covertly. But if we introduce symbols, symbols create boundaries, thinking boundaries and feeling-based boundaries, and they also help us to intuitively map out what we need to do, such that under pressure, when the logic, the front part of our brain is overwhelmed, the back part of our brain can still rely on these symbols. When we understand the logic and we combine the logic with symbols, we can start to create maps for ourselves, maps of understanding that support us under extreme emotional pressure. This all sounds like interesting information. If you'd like to know more, contact me afterwards. But basically, in a nutshell, when it comes to the EQ code, what we do is we teach leaders and their teams the very simple logic that underpins amazing levels of emotional intelligence. When we understand the logic, It's not an instantaneous improvement to the emotional intelligence, but it allows us to very quickly and easily see where our gaps are. And when we can see where our personal gaps are, and we can see where others' personal gaps are, we can start to understand and work with each other and support each other very quickly and very easily. Once we have good logic, we have good emotional intelligence, we can develop a strong sense of adversity quotient, which is resilience. So resilience is based on either very strong, robust logic that suits just us, but ideally resilience is based on simple logic that also is emotionally intelligent. So it's logic that suits ourselves and the rest of the world as well. And when we build resilience on top of that base, it's a beautiful, beautiful level of resilience. And it's not the really tough resilience that we often see in some of our stronger, more intellectual individuals who are highly resilient, but they're lacking the emotional attachment, emotional empathy, and they support themselves and their resilience with logic that suits them, but doesn't always suit other people. Okay, so this is the importance of the EQ code, helps all types of individuals to improve their emotional intelligence levels. The other thing that happens with the EQ code is we eventually, not instantaneously, but eventually it's all content free. We're pretty much content free to start with. We use content only to highlight points. So it's a very safe way to learn and grow your emotional intelligence. But eventually we get to a space where we can massively improve our amount of vulnerability that is shared between a team. And it's this vulnerability quotient that's a difference that makes a difference in business. Because when we have people being able to express their feelings, not in a messy, unuseful way, but in a very emotionally intelligent and vulnerable way, then teams can start to get insights. So an individual can say, I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm not quite sure why, but can you just acknowledge that I don't feel comfortable with that? And if the team goes, wow, okay, we hear that, talk to me about why you don't feel comfortable, talk around it, we'll listen, then we can get innovative, very innovative insights. So innovation and synergy happens between teams. So synergy, together we achieve more, 1 + 1 = 3, and innovation are new insights that take us to higher and higher levels. So by improving the emotional intelligence of our team, what we do is we improve our abilities of our individuals to feel good and engage with themselves. We improve the ability of teams to work well together, and we improve the profitability of the business at the end of the day. If you watch one of my other videos on the real cost of emotional intelligence, it'll take you through the real cost and also the real benefits of improving the emotional intelligence of your team. If you've been intrigued to find out more by watching this video, I'd love you to reach out and connect with me. nick@inspiretribe.com.au is my email address, but feel free to give the office a call or Google the EQ code, or check us out on inspiretribe.com.au if you need to know a bit more. But I'd love to speak to you if this is of interest and you'd like to be part of the EQ revolution that's going to happen over the coming decade.